Hello, I'm Toycat, and welcome back to the second channel video. Today we're talking about airports. They're everyone's favourite thing, right? Actually, I think most people really don't like airports, but I personally really do quite like airports. They've got this sense of adventure, everyone's going to some far-off place or to do some important thing, and basically, yeah, I think airports are pretty cool, and because I flew a lot last year, and hopefully we'll fly a lot more this year, especially with, like, budget carriers, which often like to use the further away airports, one of the things that I noticed very quickly, and that you'll probably notice if you do a lot of flying, is that lots of airports are named after cities that they're not very close to at all. So, for instance, London Stansted, which is my favourite example of just like, I hate going there. London Stansted is 40 miles out, so this is Stansted here. This is the centre of London. There is a 40-mile gap between the two, and it takes quite a considerable amount of time to go from one to the other, but that's not even the worst offender. When I flew into Stansted one time from Oslo Rige, the distance from Oslo Rige or Rige is 55 miles from, Rige to the centre, which is pretty significant too. That's a train and a bus, but it's not even in the top 5 of worst, airports in terms of the distance from the, the city they serve, the centre anyway, to the airport. And I figured, why not go through the top 5 with today's video? Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Let's get straight into it, and let's start with one I've actually been to, because it is Stockholm. So I flew out from Stockholm Airport like once last year, because I stayed there for a week to do videos and stuff. Fun fact, there's probably videos on the channel. But yeah, basically I flew out from Stockholm, and I did it via a budget airline airport thing, which was a Ryanair hub, which is near Nyköping. So this airport is actually perfect if you're going to Nyköping, but if you're going to Stockholm, and it's called Stockholm Skavata Airport, it's not so great. So yeah, this is Stockholm Skavata. Side note, by the way, I really love the Swedish language because the word, well, one of the reasons is because the Swedish word for airport is flygplats. There's just something beautiful about that. But yeah, anyway, let's talk about the Stockholm Skavata flygplats, because basically this is an airport 66 miles from the centre of Stockholm, and because of the geography, it kind of feels like a lot more because you take a bus and it takes about 2 hours, an hour and a half or something like that. It's a pretty decent amount of time from Stockholm to the airport, and it's also a really dead and really far out there airport, which makes you go, oh, that's kind of that. However, even though this is the 5th worst and it's a really far out airport, I would still recommend it in a lot of circumstances, because the bus is only 120 krona, which is like, I think it was about £10 at the current exchange rate, probably a lot less now, or maybe a little bit more than £10, but it was about 120 krona, which is not too horrendous, especially given how much cheaper your flight will be. And also Nyköping is a place worth visiting in its own right. Supposedly it's got stuff like hiking, and it's just a quaint little village you could visit on the way to Stockholm. And bear in mind, the distance from its airport to itself is really close, unlike the distance to Stockholm, which, like I said, very far away, 66 miles on a straight line. And because you can't actually take the straight line, you have to take this bridge here, and I think the time I went, the bridge was down, but it happened to come back at the right time. I don't know how that makes sense, but yeah, basically, there's a lot of pain that you can go through when this goes wrong, but when it goes right, it's bad, but it's not as bad as 4 others, because that's how top 5s work. So yeah, let's talk about the 4th one. Everyone loves top 5s, right? But yeah, let's talk about the 4th worst airport in terms of distance from the city the airport is named after and the actual city itself, because it is Frankfurt. So Frankfurt is a city that you probably know because it sounds like a tasty sausage, but no, Frankfurt is a city which has, it's like one of the global hubs of Europe, I describe it as. It's got a lot of banking stuff there. It's got one of the biggest airports in Europe. However, it also has one of the not so biggest airports in Europe, and also one of the worst airports in Europe. And this is the one that actually made me want to talk about this subject, because I read about, I haven't been this myself, but I have, I did read a lot about it on Reddit, because there is an airport called Frankfurt Hahn Airport. So I'll just type in Hahn and find the airport from there. The airport, it's called Frankfurt Hahn. It's very close to, wait one sec. Frankfurt. I like some of these airports are particularly hard to find in an map. Here is Frankfurt Hahn, Flughafen. Can't pronounce German. It's okay. Oh, by the way, here's my plan. Whenever I pronounce something wrong from now on, I'm just gonna do something like, oh yeah, I mean, you could comment on the fact that I said the word for airport wrong, or you could comment on the fact that I'm a British person wearing a Donald Trump shirt. What's that about? Does he support Donald? Does he not? Is he being comment about that instead. Anyway, Frankfurt Hahn Airport is actually a solid, it's more than 70 miles from, Frankfurt to Frankfurt Hahn. And the craziest thing about this is it's actually, Frankfurt Hahn is closer to Luxembourg than it is to Frankfurt, which means if you flew into this airport and you had a last, minute change of mind of like, I actually don't want to go to Frankfurt, I want to go to Luxembourg, it will take you less time to get from your airport to get to Luxembourg, which is pretty crazy to me. Luxembourg City is about the same time if you take a coach, and realistically, they're about equidistant. But yeah, still, this is like the low-budget airline, not only for Frankfurt, which still, again, it's got one of the biggest airports, you don't necessarily need to take it, but also for Luxembourg City, which I kind of like personally, as a little weird thing, and it will come up later in here, because it's closely linked to the first one. But let's move on next to the 3rd worst airport in terms of how well it serves its country. By the way, all 5 of these are in Europe, so this is the top 5 for Europe, but also just because Europe tends to be the worst at this for some bizarre reason. Maybe it's because of the low-cost airlines have like a particularly big rise in Europe because of the whole open skies thing. Yeah, that's a whole own thing. But anyway, let's talk about the 3rd worst one, which is for Oslo. So it's not Oslo Reich, which I mentioned before, particularly awful airport in terms of how well it's served. There's also Oslo Moss, which I believe is near Moss over here, but there's also a third airport which is particularly bad, and it's Oslo Torp Airport. So again, I'm gonna have to do it right here because I always get lost when I try to find it on the map, because airports they blend in pretty well, is what I'm saying. So yeah, this is Oslo Torp, or Torp Sandefjord. It's actually officially not for Oslo, it's for Sandefjord, sorry. However, it's called the Oslo Airport when you search it into Ryanair or whatever else, and the distance from this to Oslo is so staggering when you look at a map, because again, the straight line distance is already pretty bad. We'll measure it right now, by the way, because fun fact, Google actually gives you a tool to measure the distance from one place to another. A lot of people don't know that, but I pressed the wrong button there. Oops. But yeah, so let's try that again, shall we? So let's just press X there. So yeah, you can actually measure a distance from one place to another, so you can see the exact straight line distance. But the crazy thing about this is, even though the straight line distance is pretty darn bad, as you can see, that's 2.5 miles apparently. Even though the straight line distance is bad, one, that's not to the center, that's just to some random point in Oslo, but two, you have to go all the way around, which means your actual distance, the time it takes, is significantly worse. And also, just look at this on the map. What's going on there? I can't say for certain. That's just a weird little thing. And yeah, the distance from Oslo Torp to Oslo is just one of the worst in Europe in terms of how long it takes you. Don't fly in there. It's like a 2.5-3 hour transfer. I mean, you can do it by train as far as I understand, but you have to take a bus to the train again. Just don't, is what I'm saying. Just don't do that yourself. If you're gonna go into a budget, Oslo Airport, take one of the other ones. But realistically, I'd recommend go to their main one, because Norway is such an expensive country that doing anything like that will significantly increase the cost. Do as much as you can after spending outside of Norway. It's a probably little separate tip. But anyway, that is the second worst. But what is the that's the third worst. So what is the second worst? Which is actually going back to Germany. Germany's just particularly good at naming airports badly. Or again, airlines have some part of this, because bear in mind, if there's no law stopping the airport from doing it, a lot of the time they'll just be like, actually, yeah, we'll just call it that. So the last one here is called Munich West, or as it's actually called, because they're Allgäu Airport. But they insisted. Again, airlines insist on. Fun fact. Actually, let me just show you the whole monster here. You can see they've got a little Ryanair. Oh wait, one sec. You can see they've got a little Ryanair logo over there. Also, look at me, I'm in a bubble, I can fly. But no, they've got a little Ryanair logo there just to kind of show that, yep, we know the reason behind this. So yeah, let me just edit that, move that around, and let's talk about this airport. So yeah, it's Munich West Airport. The distance from this to the center of Munich is actually further. So okay, again, I used the tool for this because I was like, no way, that's actually true, but it actually is. So we'll do the distance to there and the distance to there. Somehow I've actually accidentally got this caught in there, so clear measurement. Let's try that one again. But the distance from here to the center of Munich is over 60 miles, but that's not the crazy bit, because that's already pretty bad by itself. But the crazy bit to me is the fact that the distance, again, that's straight line distance, by the way. The straight line distance from this airport, Munich West, to Austria is significantly less. The distance to Switzerland is significantly less, and you can also get to Switzerland with less, distance than you can get. Also, this isn't probably a line, but you can get to Switzerland with less distance than you can, to get to Liechtenstein, which is you can get to Liechtenstein with less distance and time than you can get to Munich, despite it being a Munich airport, which is just crazy stuff to me. And I guess it's one of the weird, parts of being in Europe, this part thing, but it's still kind of crazy. Go to Liechtenstein instead of Munich and save yourself a little bit of distance. Anyway, in case you're running or something, or biking. But yeah, let's move on to the final airport here, which is the very worst one in Europe in terms of, the distance between the airport, the city and the airport it supposedly serves, because it is Paris Vatry Airport. So this airport is called Disneyland a lot in air quotes, and it's also one of the lowest rated international airports, because the distance between this and the center, again, we're going to get our precise Google one here, because again, most reports vary this one massively. I heard 100, okay, clear measurement again. I heard, when I first searched it up, it said 150 miles or something, and that's not true at all. As you can actually see, it's only 82 miles, but still, 82 miles. That is a ridiculous distance. Also, I guess the other ones were kilometers when I said earlier, because I was like, wait a minute, that didn't add up. But yeah, 66 kilometers, now it's 82 miles, and maybe that's 120 kilometers. But yeah, as you can see, the distance from, the airport to the center is 82 miles. There is several hours of transfer, and the crazy thing is, it's actually named, Disney Airport in brackets a lot of the time, but in spite of that, again, city center, somewhere around there, 85, 90 miles roughly. It's actually really far away from Disneyland too, so it's, a similar distance. So it really is just a low-budget airline if you want to pretend you're going to Paris, but really, again, you're going almost as close to, Luxembourg City or Belgium. In fact, if we look over here, yeah, as you can see, same distance to Belgium, or similar distance to Luxembourg City, and one of my favourite things about this is you're not even that far away from Frankfurt Hahn Airport. So if you wanted to, you could just use these airports as transfers and go between them. You shouldn't do that, no one should ever do that, but if you really wanted to, you could. And you shouldn't, because they're bad. And honestly, these airports are just kind of bad examples of like, oh yeah, sometimes when you're going to a place, always search the full name of the airport and make sure you know where you're going to. If you're flying to London, you could be flying to one of 6 airports, and the experience and the cost and the time, everything about it varies so much. You know, Stansted is a low-cost airport. It's not as well put together as like a Heathrow or a Gatwick or a London City. These things change so much from place to place. Because fun fact, places like London City is this close to the centre. It's like 6 miles. There are airports like this is one of the best in the world. It's like ranked 3rd in the world for closeness to the city. There is the centre of Belfast, Northern Ireland's capital, even whatever. But we won't get into capitals, but Northern Ireland's capital, let's call it. The centre of Belfast to George Best City Airport. It's very, 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 very close at 3 miles distance, or according to Google. Because I'm going to recheck all of these now, just one more time to be like, here you can see it. As you can see, 2.68 miles according to that. So absolutely crazy the distance. I guess it depends on where you measure from the airport. That's what I've been doing wrong. But yeah, 2 point something miles if you really cheat, and 3 miles if you really push it. That's a crazy distance from that to the center, and that's a big difference. The difference in cost, time, etc. is going to be so massive compared to flying into George Best as opposed to flying into Belfast International, which is somewhere in Antrim. I always it's finding airports is hard, but it's just over there, so we'll move it all the way up there. As you can see, the distance from Belfast International to Belfast is 12.24 miles. It takes like a solid 45 minutes to do that or something, as opposed to George Best, where you could walk it. You can walk that if you want to, and that's pretty cool if you ask me. Anyway, hope you did enjoy this video. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.